Today is January 12th, 2021. The COVID-19 pandemic has now been going on for just over 10 months. March 11th, 2020. That was the day that the World Health Organization originally declared COVID-19 as a pandemic. At that point, there had already been thousands of cases in China and hundreds of deaths at least, but it wasn't really spreading that much in other countries until March. But March of last year, March 2020, that's when this virus got out of control all over the world, especially in the United States. And ever since then, things have been really bad for this virus because, as I speak now, on January 12th, 2021, we have just reached 92 million worldwide cases, and our death count is 1.97 million now. So, I'm making this video specifically because I want to talk about the global numbers for COVID 19. I want to talk about COVID 19 as it relates to the world as a whole and how Earth as a whole, the entire planet, is doing with this virus. Because usually I spend more time talking about the US numbers and the world numbers, but this video is specifically meant for Earth as a whole, the planet as a whole. So, like I said, 92 million cases worldwide in total throughout this pandemic, and it's only been 10 months since it was declared a pandemic and only around a year since it first started spreading to people. That's a very alarming number if you ask me. So I'm making this video for two reasons. One, we're about to reach 100 million cases worldwide, and two, we're about to reach 2 million deaths worldwide. Both of those numbers are very alarming. 2 million deaths worldwide, 100 million cases worldwide. And like, if I had seen these numbers, if I had known like back in March, like if someone told me back in March of last year, 2020, that, oh, by January 2021, we're going to reach 100 million cases and 2 million deaths, I would have not believed that at all. I would have been either completely shocked or I would have been in denial because those numbers seemed extremely high. Even in like late spring, even like April, May, those numbers seemed very high and like seemed completely unrealistic. But that's where we're at. So at this point in time, across the world, we're getting around 700 to 800,000 cases per day. Out of every single day throughout this pandemic, January 8th, 2021 had the highest number of cases in a single day. On January 8th of this year, which was just 4 days ago, we had 839,000 cases, 839,000 new COVID-19 cases across the world just in that one single day. That's the all-time high throughout this entire pandemic. So currently, the COVID-19 virus is spreading more now than any other point in this pandemic. For reference, back in the spring, there were only around 75,000 new cases per day, 75 to 100,000 new cases per day in the spring. But then in the summer, that spiked to 250,000 per day. In around June of last year, 2020, it spiked from 100,000 to 150,000 per day. But then by late summer, early fall, that number was over 250,000 per day. Like by August, September, we had almost 300,000 per day, but it continued to get worse. By September, we reached 350,000 per day, and by October, we reached 400,000 per day. And then in November, we had a massive spike, and a large reason for that is because the United States had a massive spike, and the United States as a whole has contributed a lot of the cases to the pandemic overall, throughout this entire pandemic. Like, as I speak, there's 92 million cases in the world, but 23 million of those are from the United States. I mean 92 million in total, like not 92 million like active cases, but 92 million cases there have been in total throughout the entire pandemic. 23 million of those 92 million are from the United States, which is exactly one quarter. Or like not exactly a quarter, but like right around a quarter. 23 over 92 is around 1/4. So the United States is responsible for a quarter of the worldwide cases, even though the United States only makes up like 4% of the worldwide population. So that just shows how badly the United States handled COVID-19 and how much they're contributing to the daily case count and death count worldwide. Especially considering the fact that the United States already has a lot of people to begin with, so if they have a higher proportion of their population getting this virus compared to the rest of the world, that's really going to reflect in the worldwide numbers. So that is, getting back to the main point, that is why you saw a massive spike throughout October and November. In September, you had around 300,000 cases per day, but then by November, you had 600,000 cases per day, doubled that. And then it got even worse since November. In the past 2 months, it got even worse. And like I said, we're at its worst actually, but at this point, we're getting around 700 to 750,000 cases every single day, and I don't see this slowing down for at least another month. I was originally thinking that by late January, things would start to slow down quite a lot, but there's two reasons why that prediction is wrong. One, United States has done a really bad job. At least at first they did a really bad job of distributing the vaccine. I think now they're doing a much better job, and that's a really nice thing to hear. But for the first few weeks, United States did not distribute the vaccine well, so that's a lot more cases that could have been prevented that weren't prevented. But the second reason also is because of Christmas break and New Year's Eve, also New Year's Day. Christmas and New Year's, those two holidays, a lot of people probably went out and met up with other people, even when they probably shouldn't have, but that's probably going to cause a lot of new cases. We're seeing that right now in the United States, but even in the next couple of weeks, that's going to unfortunately cause a lot more new COVID cases and unfortunately more COVID deaths. So we're currently in the middle of a COVID death spike in the United States, but I'm hoping that by mid February, that can start to slow down. I don't know for sure what's going to happen, but also like the fact that most people are now fixated on the Capitol Hill riots that happened a few days ago and the impacts of that. I don't think as many people are currently thinking about COVID, which is understandable, but at the same time, I hope people will at least keep in mind that this virus not only is still around, not only is it still spreading to people across the country and the world, but it's also worse now than ever before. I know this video is mainly about the worldwide numbers, but like the United States is a big contributor to the worldwide numbers, so that's why I keep bringing up the United States. We have more cases than any other country in the world. That's the main reason why I keep bringing up the US, but I would like to keep in mind this video is mainly for the global numbers. So, but even across the world, COVID-19 now is worse than ever before. Same with the death count. Like, just today on January 12th, 2021, as I speak, there have been 15,000 deaths today across the world, which I believe is an all time high throughout this entire pandemic. In the spring of last year, deaths peaked at around 7.5K per day. Then it got a bit better for a while. Throughout the summer, you had around 5,000 deaths per day, but then it spiked quite a lot in the fall because there was a increase in the daily case count. You also saw an increase in the daily death count. So we're currently in the middle of a spike, not only for the case count, but also for the death count, the daily case count and daily death count across the world. And that is why I would like to make more videos talking about this pandemic still, because in all the major news networks, they're talking about the Capitol Hill riots and the impacts of that still, but I don't want people to forget about COVID-19 and how bad the situation still is. And the good news though is that the vaccine, there have been two vaccines in the United States that have been approved, and both of those vaccines are now being given to patients. I made a video yesterday talking about the vaccine distribution process and how many people in each state have actually gotten the vaccine, so you can check that video out if you haven't already. But I'm hoping that we can continue to make a lot of progress regarding vaccine distribution in the upcoming months, because that'll really do a great job of stopping the spread of this pandemic. Besides vaccines, though, even if you don't have access to a vaccine, which most people don't at this moment, it's only people that are one, healthcare workers, and two, above the age of 65, and three, have serious pre-existing health conditions. Those are the people that have access to the vaccine. Everyone else, though, at this moment, for the most part, do not have access to this vaccine. But even if you don't have access to the vaccine, you can still wear a mask. Masks do an amazing job of stopping the spread of this virus. I mean, first of all, you shouldn't go out if you don't like really need to. You shouldn't meet up with a large amount of other people. I guess if you meet up with a couple other people, that's fine. But even then, you should wear the mask whenever you meet up with someone. Whenever you go out somewhere where you know you'll be in contact with other people, you should definitely wear a mask in those instances, because that'll do an amazing job of reducing the impacts of this pandemic, reducing the negative impacts of this pandemic. Studies have shown that we would not have seen a spike nearly this big in the case count and death count per day if the majority of Americans wore a mask whenever they were able to. But unfortunately, a lot of people did not wear a mask even when they should have, and that's one of the reasons, not the only reason, far from the only reason, but one of the reasons why we're seeing the massive amounts of cases per day of this virus and the massive amounts of deaths per day from this virus. So, like I said, we're about to reach 100 million cases and 2 million deaths. That's the number one reason why I made this video today. But if I had to make a prediction, I would predict that by tomorrow, or wait, yeah, not tomorrow, day after tomorrow, so like January 14th, or maybe even January 15th, we would reach 2 million deaths, which is a very disturbing amount of deaths from this pandemic. The thing is that it's not even just 2 million, it's probably a lot more than 2 million. There's probably a lot of deaths across the world from this virus that have not been accounted for. So that's the disturbing thing, but I'm hoping that the vaccine will put an end to that in the next few months. But if I had to make a prediction, it would be January 15th when we actually cross the 2 million death threshold. So, or January 14th. It's one of those two dates because the reason why I say that is because for the past few days we've had right around 15,000 deaths per day across the world. So we're 30,000 deaths away from 2 million, unfortunately, and 15,000 times 2 is 30,000, which is why I'm saying that either by January 14th or January 15th, we're going to cross the 2 million death threshold. Now, for the 100 million case threshold, that's going to take a few more weeks than the 2 million death threshold. We're at 92 million cases, which means we need 8 million more for 100 million. I don't want to reach that number. Like, we're at how many digits? 8 digits now, 8 figures, but soon enough we're going to reach 9 figures, which is very disturbing. I really hope we never ever reach 10 figures, but I don't think we will, thankfully, because the vaccine's out and a billion is a very large number. Like, a billion is literally 10 times larger than 100 million. So I don't think, thankfully, we're ever going to reach 10 figures, 10 digits, but 9 digits is still a very disturbing amount of numbers, amount of digits, amount of figures. So I don't want to reach 9 digits, 9 figures, but looks like if I had to make a prediction, by the end of January, we're going to reach 100 million cases in total from this pandemic. That's not even going to be the actual number. Like, just like the number of deaths, number of cases is definitely overcounted by quite a lot because a lot of people, if they have the virus, they just don't bother to get tested because they don't experience symptoms that are severe enough to warrant them getting tested. So it's possible that someone is asymptomatic but they still have the virus. Like, they have the virus, but they don't experience any major symptoms, so they don't bother to get tested because they don't even know they have the virus or know that anything's off. So, people like that, those are the reason why the number of cases across the world is severely undercounted. And I think that the number of cases across the world is more undercounted than the number of deaths across the world because it's easier to notice when somebody dies from COVID 19 than just when somebody gets COVID 19. Because if somebody dies from COVID 19, it's pretty obvious to see that generally that COVID 19 was the thing that contributed to their death, but it's possible for someone to have COVID 19 also and just be asymptomatic but still technically have it. So that's why I think the deaths are less undercounted than the cases, but both of those figures are definitely undercounted. So I would say that we've definitely passed 100 million cases across the world by now and 2 million deaths by now, but in terms of the official recorded numbers, I think we're going to cross 2 million deaths on January 15th, by January 15th, and 100 million cases by January 31st, 2021, obviously. Before I end this video off, I want to talk about the number of active cases and the number of closed cases. So currently, according to worldometers.com, that's the website I've been using for this whole video, so credits to them, there's around 24 million cases that are active, so right around a quarter of all the COVID-19 cases throughout this pandemic, a pandemic that's been going on for almost a year. Almost a quarter of those cases are still active, meaning those patients are still infected, which just goes to show how much this virus has actually spread in the last month or two. But out of those, only zero point 0.5 are in serious condition or critical condition, which is, I'm glad it's not any higher than that, but that's still 100,000 people in serious condition or critical condition, which is still pretty alarming, but I'm just thankful it's not higher than 0.5%. In terms of closed cases, 67 million people have had an outcome regarding this virus in total across the world. 65 million of those people recovered, but the other 1.97 million, like I said, unfortunately passed away. So, based on all the cases across the world that have been recorded, there's been a roughly 3% death rate with this virus, which is still pretty. It's not. That's only 3%, like, compared to 100%, 3% is pretty low. Like, that's like you have a bowl of 100 Skittles, 3 of them are poisonous. Yeah, that's only 3 out of 100, but like you still don't want to take any of those Skittles because 3% is actually a pretty high number, especially when you have 7 billion people across the planet. If every single person in the world got the virus and only 3% of those people died, that's still millions and millions of people who would die across the world from this pandemic. So 3% seems low, but like you got to consider how many people there actually are on this planet and really put that into perspective because that is how many deaths we're dealing with. 3% death rate, but 3% of over a billion people. If this virus spread to every person in the world, 3% of 7 billion, or almost 8 billion at this point, that is still tens of millions of people. Before this video ends, I just want to say I hope we don't ever reach either 200 million recorded cases across the planet, or 4 million recorded deaths across the planet. Because we're already at 2 million deaths and 100 million cases. We're not there yet, but we're about to be there, so I'm hoping that the vaccine will do an amazing job of stopping this pandemic throughout 2021. I'm still pretty optimistic for this year, even with all the chaos that has happened in the past 2 weeks. So I think the vaccine will do an amazing job. We just have to stay optimistic and keep our heads up.